So the NFL Combine happens this weekend, and for me, I am excited because for no other reason than the simple fact is it'll actually kick me in the tail and get me started on thinking a lot more about the NFL Draft and talking about the NFL Draft and doing videos about the NFL Draft. Because Lord knows the past 2 months, life is getting in the way, and it is time to make a stand and say enough is enough, and I'm not going to take it anymore! Can't let life and work and everything else interject so much that it saps you from those things that you enjoy, the passions that you have. And one of my passions in life is this yearly circus and circuit of the NFL Draft. So, that said, I'm looking forward to the Combine very much, as surely a lot of you are, especially if you clicked on this video, because I'm presenting you my pre-Combine 2020 NFL Mock Draft. I know, exciting on so many different levels, I am sure. It's only a one-round edition, but I've put all the picks in the description box down below, so you're certainly happy to check them out, and then let me know how wrong I am and how wrong I'm going to be. Look, just like OJ, I'm taking a stab at it. Sometimes you connect, and sometimes you don't, allegedly. But nonetheless, let's talk a little bit about this mock draft and look ahead to the Combine. Obviously, when you talk about any mock drafts at this point in time, the Combine is going to significantly shake things up. And you will hear GMs and front office people and scouts and coaches spin that yarn about how the Combine doesn't matter and the film is what ultimately tells the true story. And in a lot of ways, we know they are completely and totally full of crap. If they didn't think there was value in the Combine, they wouldn't do it. If they didn't think that this was a majorly important part of the evaluation and scouting process, they wouldn't do it. And it is so ironic and so funny how every single year, time after time, team after team, you will see teams get looped in by this guy that ran really fast at the Combine, or he measured out really well, or in some cases a guy drops way too dang far because he didn't run as fast in the 40 and he didn't look as good in his undershorts as you might have anticipated. Like, this is the madness, the silly season that we talk about when it comes to the NFL. You're going to hear about Joe Burrow's hand size, you're going to hear about this, you're going to hear about that. And in a lot of cases, a whole bunch shouldn't matter at the end of the day if the film actually did matter, but we know that is certainly not the case. Anyways, getting off of that diatribe, let's talk about the mock draft that I have put out there. Not a ton of change, I think, at the top, if I remember correctly. Frankly, it's been a few weeks since I've done one of these. Still got Joe Burrow going #1 overall. And I know there's quite a bit of talk about whether or not he really wants to be in Cincinnati. He surely wants to be the #1 pick, but does he want to be the #1 pick and play for the Cincinnati Bengals? Is he trying to make the situation tough enough for the Bengals where they feel forced or compelled to trade him to somebody else? Maybe somebody like the Dolphins, maybe somebody like the Chargers, maybe somebody wants to get really nuts like the Raiders, somewhere along those lines. I don't know. Ultimately, Joe Burrow is a grown man, and he has to make the decisions he feels are best for him. He has to make the decisions and live with the results and or consequences. I personally hope, for the sake of the Cincinnati Bengals organization, their fan base, that Joe Burrow ends up, if they determine he's the best player in the draft, the best quarterback in the draft, that the Bengals take him and that he decides to play there. Because to me, there is an element of, if you are the #1 pick as a quarterback and you are that good and you are as advertised, you should, to me anyways, have the mindset and the mentality that you can go into any organization and be a big reason that it works. You can be the guy that turns it around. Like, to me, that's true franchise quarterback type of mentality. Now, we have seen in drafts past John Elway, Eli Manning be the #1 overall pick and ultimately leverage themselves out of the situation. And each and every situation is different. But I would caution Joe Burrow on this. If he decides he wants to make this type of power play ultimately and try to force his way out of Cincinnati, sometimes be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. But we will see. Still feels like for the time that he'll be the #1 overall pick, but a lot of things can happen in the next 2 months. I've still got Chase Young going to the Redskins at pick 2. I don't know where in recent weeks these rumors started about the Bears being interested in the second pick and potentially trading Khalil Mack. Like, those could be separate conversations based off where the organization is and how horribly they missed on Trubisky. Does it make sense to pay Khalil Mack that money, or does it make sense to trade him and get some commodities back in terms of draft pick currency? It is a valid and fair question that the organization should be thinking about. But leave it to even just rumors to point out just how dumb this franchise would be. To be sitting there and talking about doing something like that, only to move up to the number 2 pick where you don't have a first-round pick, so that way you could, in theory, potentially draft the second-best quarterback? Or even worse, take an edge rusher when you just traded away an edge rusher where the cap difference isn't going to be that significant where it makes a whole lot of sense to do so? Stunning. And I'd be surprised if the Redskins traded out of that second pick. Now, with a new head coach, new regime there could be the possibility, even though all intents and purposes we believe that Daniel Snyder is very big on Dwayne Haskins, that they could throw a curveball here. It may not be Chase Young. It may be Tua. It may be Justin Herbert. It might be one of the quarterbacks. And it could be. Because Washington could look at it and say, defensively, we did bring in a defensive-minded head coach, but all the while, we've invested a lot of draft pick currency. Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and Montez Sweat. That's a lot of investment in first-round defensive edge rushers and pass rushers and defensive linemen and so forth. Like, they have a lot invested there. Still have Kerrigan there. Like, do you really need Chase Young? But then you could look at the 49ers formula. You could have made the same argument, certainly last year. In some cases, we're making the same argument that the 49ers didn't need Nick Bosa, but clearly Nick Bosa made a difference, and the freaking 49ers made it all the way to the Super Bowl. Not saying that that's in the cards for the Redskins, but if you feel Chase Young is the best player, you have to take the best player and hope that you can build around Dwayne Haskins and not give up on him so early. In terms of some of the other notable picks early, you still got Derrick Brown going 3 to Detroit. I've seen Okudah being mocked there. I wonder if a corner would actually go in the top 3. It doesn't happen very often, so I believe that when I see it. The Giants taking an offensive lineman at number 4, in this case, Jedrick Wills from Alabama, makes a world of sense. You got to protect your young quarterback. They need help in a lot of places. So you could definitely sign off on that. Now where it gets interesting is Miami and the Chargers, where it looks more and more that both teams are going to be looking at the quarterback position, especially the Chargers, now that for all intents and purposes they have moved on from the Phillip Rivers experience. There's still talk right now that the Dolphins love Tua and Tua's their guy, but that could be a smokescreen. That could all change. There's a lot of thought that maybe the Chargers really coveted Justin Herbert, and maybe that's part of the reason why they felt like they were okay to move on from Phillip Rivers. But again, they could potentially covet Tua. Or the Dolphins could covet the kid from Oregon more than they covet Tua, and they end up taking him, and then Tua's there for the Chargers at 6, and then who knows what the hell happens. Like, all types of crazy things could go on. There are going to be guys in this process that are going to drop out of this first round because the combine isn't the best suited to demonstrate their skills and what they can bring to the table. But then you have guys that, if they test well, it's probably going to help their stock significantly. Guys like Isaiah Simmons from Clemson. Sure, there'll be questions about what position he plays, but if he goes out there and lights up the combine, I think a lot of teams are going to be less concerned about that. Becton, the offensive tackle from Louisville, when people look at his size and his ability to move, here's a guy that you sit there and say, okay, somebody's going to take a top 10 gamble on him and think that he's going to be the offensive lineman that Greg Robinson wasn't and was supposed to be and ultimately wasn't, but maybe not the drug dealer that he was. Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina, this could be another potential opportunity for him to showcase himself really well. Some of these wide receivers, like if they go out there and they run in the low to mid 4.3, certainly is not going to hurt their case. Guys like Ruggs and Jeudy, they put up big blazing times, then you're going to be looking at these guys potentially shooting up the boards, although they might not, because this wide receiver class is perceived to have really good marquee talent and a lot of depth in it. You could see a situation where the talent itself merits that these guys be top 10 picks, but when you look at the larger picture and you see the talent level of the class overall, when you look at teams and their ability to find wide receivers in round 2 and round 3, there might be less urgency to take one of these guys in the top 10, especially in a lot of cases with these first-round wide receivers. It takes 2 to 3 years for them to really get into their rhythm in the NFL compared to other positions. There's a longer growth curve and so forth. But this is my mock draft. You can knock it if you want. I will be back after the combine to give you an updated version that surely will reflect a lot of changes. I don't doubt that for a second. And hopefully I'll be able to do some combine recap videos throughout the weekend as well. I'm ready to sit back and enjoy this, damn it. I sure am.